Okay, here we are. Welcome. I think I'm ready. Welcome to session number 150 of Kevin Reads A Course in Miracles. Today we will be finishing chapter 18, which is entitled The Passing of the Dream. We just let the dream pass away. We relinquish it. And this is section number 9, Roman numeral 9. All right, and this is entitled The Two Worlds. All right, Jesus is going to talk about the two different worlds. He's going to put it to us that way. There's the world that the belief in separation conjured up, and the real world of heaven. All right, those two different worlds. They're very close to one another, but we think there's a thick wall in between them. And some don't even know there's another world. So, lucky us. Okay, the two worlds. Let's see what Jesus has to say about that. It says, "You have been told to bring the darkness to the light and guilt to holiness. And you have also been told that error must be corrected at its source. Therefore, it is that tiny part of yourself, the little thought that seems split off and separate, the Holy Spirit needs. The rest is fully in God's keeping and needs no guide. Yet this wild and delusional thought needs help, because in its delusions, it thinks it is the Son of God, whole and omnipotent, sole ruler of the kingdom it set apart to tyrannize by madness into obedience and slavery. This is the little part you think you stole from heaven. Give it back to heaven. Heaven has not lost it, but you have lost sight of heaven. Let the Holy Spirit remove it from the withered kingdom in which you set it off, surrounded by darkness, guarded by attack, and reinforced by hate. Within its barricades is still a tiny segment of the Son of God, complete and holy, serene and unaware of what you think surrounds it." Alrighty. Just that, to begin with that last sentence, all right, within its barricades, all right, within this fortress of the body, and then this fortress of the world all around, all right, there is still a tiny segment of the Son of God. All right, you still carry the light with you. The spark is there. Right? It's complete, and it's holy, right? And it's serene, and it's unaware of what you think surrounds it. It's unaware of this and the world. Right? So, that being said, let's go back to the first sentence there. "You have been told to bring darkness to light and guilt to holiness, and you have also been told that error must be corrected at its source." So the error is in the mind. The error is that thought that said, maybe I could be separate. Or maybe I could be an individual. All right? That's where the error was. We believed that we could be separate. And so that's where the error must be corrected. Right? We believe we're separated. The correction is what we call the atonement in the Course in Miracles. The idea, no, you didn't separate. You did not separate from the mind of God. All right? So it has to be corrected at the source. That's why we work with our thoughts, our reactions, our perceptions. And we ask for them to be corrected. We're correcting our perceptions at the source. Right? Therefore, it is the tiny part of yourself, the little thought that seems split off and separate, the Holy Spirit needs. So that's what the Holy Spirit needs. He needs us to bring that thought, that belief in separation in all its manifestations. Right? Bring it back to the mind, where the memory of who you are resides, where the symbols of Jesus and the Holy Spirit reside. Right? And with that love around you, you ask for your perception to be changed. You're willing for it to be changed. All right? So he says that little thought, it seems split off and separate. This is what the Holy Spirit needs. He says the rest is fully in God's keeping. Right? All the rest of you, so to speak, is in God's keeping. Right? It's this wild and delusional thought that needs help. Right? That wild and delusional thought that I could be separate from God. Right? That's the tiny mad idea. It's wild and delusional. That little fragment thinks it's the Son of God, whole and omnipotent, right? All-powerful and the sole ruler of this kingdom that I've set apart in order to tyrannize by madness. Right? This is the little part you think you stole from heaven. Let the Holy Spirit remove it from the withered kingdom on which you set it off. Excuse me. We missed a good sentence. It says, this is the little thing you think you have lost, you have stole from heaven. He says, heaven has not lost it. All right. He says in another place, not one note in heaven's song was missed. So heaven has not lost what you think you did, what you think you stole. All right. He says, but you have lost sight of heaven. All right. And remember that Jesus is talking to that decision-making part of the mind. Right? You've lost sight of heaven. Right? He's talking to the mind. So you lost sight of heaven. Let the Holy Spirit remove it from its withered kingdom in which you set it off, and surrounded it by darkness, guarded by attack and reinforced by hate. Right? Within its barricades is still a tiny segment of the Son of God. Right? Even within the illusion of a body, the world and all its machinations, its craziness. Those are all barricades to realizing that you have a mind and you never left heaven. Right? Within its barricades, is still a tiny segment of the Son of God, complete and holy, serene and unaware of what you think surrounds it. Right? Unaware of the body and the world. There's that little segment that is the Son of God. Right? Paragraph 2. Be you not separate, for the one who does surround it has brought union to you, returning your little offering of darkness to the eternal light. How is this done? It is extremely simple, being based on what this little kingdom really is. The barren sands, the darkness, and the lifelessness are seen only through the body's eyes. Its bleak sight is distorted, and the message it transmits to you, who made it, to limit your awareness, are little and limited, and so fragmented they are meaningless. Right? So based on what this little kingdom is, he says it's pretty simple, right, to get you back to the eternal light. Right? Then he tells you it's only seen through the body's eyes, this world. Right? And then the sight is distorted. It sees this limited awareness. It sees all these horrible images. I mean, geez, turn on the TV or go to your social media, wherever you get it. And, you know, you're bombarded. Unless you watch like cat videos all day. You're bombarded by the horrors that are happening in the world. And it's not like they just started happening. People have been horrible to one another since the beginning of time, actually. Right? As long as there's been two people, right? They've been pointing the finger at one another. It's you. But this is a desert of an existence here. It's bleak and meaningless, he says. All right, its bleak sight is distorted, and the messages it transmits to you, all right, the messages this world transmits to us, who believe we're bodies, all right, limit our awareness. He says, but you made it to do that. He said you made the whole thing up in order to limit your awareness. You turned your back on the truth that you are the unlimited offspring of the Creator. You are the unlimited offspring of the Creator, one with God. All right? Whatever words you want to use. All right? And he says, but you made this world in order to prove to yourself that you're separated, and hence you're limited. Right? So we get this limited, distorted view of everything. Right? He says you made it to limit your awareness. Right? And these messages are limited, and they're so fragmented that they're meaningless. Right? Paragraph 3, from the world of bodies made by insanity, insane messages seem to be returned to the mind that made it. And these messages bear witness to this world, pronouncing it as true. For you sent forth these messengers to bring this back to you. Everything these messages relate to you is quite external. There are no messages that speak of what lies underneath. For it is not the body that could speak of this. Its eyes perceive it not. Its senses remain quite unaware of it. Its tongue cannot relay its messages. Yet God can bring you there, if you are willing to follow the Holy Spirit through seeming terror, trusting Him not to abandon you and leave you there. For it is not His purpose to frighten you, but only yours. You are severely tempted to abandon Him at the outside ring of fear, but He would lead you safely through and far beyond. Okay? So He's telling us, trust in the Holy Spirit to be your guide. Trust in Jesus to be your guide. Right? When we start looking at things, we start to get terrified. You know, especially looking at you being introspective. You might not want to look at stuff that you've done or thought, and he says, and you walk away from the Holy Spirit right at the beginning. He says, don't do that. He won't leave you. In other words, the love won't leave you if you allow yourself to be surrounded by love as you walk through your thoughts, right? And you ask for them to be corrected. Okay? He says God can bring you there, right? To that other place, underneath, he's calling it, underneath. All right? All right, you can think of heaven as above or below. All right? So right now he's talking about what lies underneath. For it is not the body that can speak of this. All right? When you get to the point when you have those moments of awareness, right, it's almost impossible to describe them. The body can't describe it. Right? But you know what you experienced. I'm not sure which sainted human being was credited with it, but the phrase, the peace that passes all understanding. All right? Maybe it was St. Paul, one of those people. All right? So he's talking about that the body can't, it stops right at the beginning of introspection. It becomes afraid. Like, oh no, I'm going to be found out. I'm going to be exposed. I'm going to get killed. God's going to get me. And he says, no, God's going to bring you there. God's going to bring you to that serene place. All right? He says, you're severely tempted to abandon him at the outside ring of fear. But he would lead you safely through and far beyond. To me, that's the process of introspection, bringing your projections back, right, and having them corrected. Don't be afraid of whatever the thought is, you know? Just bring it. Be willing to have it changed. All right, so paragraph 4. It says, the circle of fear lies just below the body, just below the level the body sees, and seems to be the whole foundation on which the world is based. Right? Here are all the illusions, all the twisted thoughts, all the insane attacks, the fury, the vengeance, and betrayal that were made to keep guilt in place, so that the world could rise from it and keep it hidden. Its shadow rises to the surface, enough to hold its most external manifestations in darkness, and to bring despair and loneliness to it and keep it joyless. Yet its intensity is veiled by its heavy coverings and kept apart from what was made to keep it hidden. The body cannot see this, for the body arose from this for its protection, which depends on keeping it not seen. The body's eyes will never look on it, yet they will see what it dictates. Okay, all those it's. All right. He's talking about guilt. Okay? All right. The level, it seems to be the whole foundation. The circle of fear lies just below the level the body sees, which is the mind. All right? That's just below the level that the body sees. Body sees everything in form. All right? And it seems to be the whole foundation on which the world is based. And it's guilt, right? In the mind is the guilt of that thought, that belief that I separated from the oneness. That's the problem. That thought is in the mind. That's the little thought. Jesus says, just bring it. That's what the Holy Spirit needs. Bring that over. We want to change that. But what he's talking about is guilt now. Guilt is the it. Here are all the illusions, all the twisted thoughts, all the insane attacks, the fury, the vengeance, and the betrayal that were made to keep guilt in place so that the world could rise from it and keep it hidden. All right? So all the illusions and the twisted thoughts, they arise from the guilt in order to keep that original guilt hidden. Right? The ego thought system doesn't want to get back to the original thought. Because if we have that original thought corrected, the ego thought system disappears. So the world and all its machinations and all the insanity and harshness and cruelties is made to hide the guilt. It arose from the guilt. Right? In order to get rid of it, we've got to find all the people that have to be killed and eliminated. Right? And it perpetuates the guilt because it never gets to the real source. It doesn't go to into the mind. It's always looking outside in externals. Right? So the world was made to keep the guilt in place so that the world could rise from it and keep it hidden. Its shadow rises to the surface enough to hold its most external manifestations in darkness. So the shadow of guilt rises to the surface, right, just enough to hold its most external manifestations in darkness. Right? So it's external manifestations, all the people I think are guilty, all the horrible things that other people do, right? And to bring despair and loneliness, right, to the world and keep it joyless. So that's what it does. If you live long enough, you'll understand what he's talking about. All right? There's those moments when you realize this world is nutty. It's a joyless place. You know, of course, you know, it gives a little kickback every now and then. Here's some joy. But for the most part, come on now. All right? Yet, guilt's intensity, on paragraph 4, sentence 4, reading the its as guilt, yet guilt's intensity is veiled by its heavy coverings and kept apart from what was made to keep it hidden. All right. So the guilt is in the mind, and it's kept apart from what's made to keep it hidden. Right? So we're always concentrating on the body, concentrating on externals, and concentrating on the world outside. So the intensity is veiled by its heavy coverings and kept apart from what was made to keep it hidden. Right? The body cannot see this. The body can't see the guilt, for the body arose from the guilt. For guilt protection, right? Which depends on it, keeping it not seen. All right? So the body and the world, all right, are made to keep us distracted, not to go back to the mind, not to even realize you have a mind in which the answer can be found. Body's eyes will never look on it. Yet they will see what it dictates. Right? The body's eyes will see what guilt dictates. That's everything. That's everything your senses can take in and report back to you. Right? They will see what guilt dictates. Okay? The body will remain guilt's messenger, paragraph 5, and will act as it directs as long as you believe the guilt is real. Right? As they say, nothing changes if nothing changes. All right? If you continue to believe that you separated from the oneness, and therefore you're guilty, all right? If you continue to believe that guilt is real, right, the body will remain guilt's messenger. It'll do what guilt wants it to do. And it will act as it directs, as long as you believe that guilt is real. All right? For the reality of guilt is the illusion that seems to make it heavy and opaque, impenetrable, and a real foundation for the ego's thought system. Its thinness and transparency are not apparent until you see the light behind it. And you see it as a fragile veil before the light. All right? Sooner or later you'll realize that you're in the process of waking up. All right? Jesus would tell us that you've already woken up. You're just living in the aftermath of the dream. Right? But within that dream, we have to decide which guide we want. All right? And he says, and then sooner or later you'll realize that there's a different way. There's a light behind all this. All right? In paragraph 6, he says, this heavy-seeming barrier, right, this body, this world, this artificial flaw that looks like rock, is like a bank of low, dark clouds that seem to be a solid wall before the sun. Its impenetrable appearance is wholly an illusion. It gives way softly to the mountaintops that rise above it, and has no power at all to hold back anyone willing to climb above it and see the sun. It is not strong enough to stop a button's fall, nor hold a feather. Nothing can rest upon it, for it is but an illusion of a foundation. Try but to touch it, and it disappears. Attempt to grasp it, and your hands hold nothing. All right? I mean, if you can picture yourself walking along a street or somewhere where it's foggy. All right? You can't see to the corner. You can't see the beach, wherever it is that it's foggy. He says, it looks like a big wall. He goes, but if you reach out and try to grab the fog, you don't get anything. All right? You hold nothing. All right? He's saying that's what this world is. It seems like a big dark bank of clouds, right, that's standing between you and the light of heaven. He says, but it can't even hold the button. If you go to touch it, you're holding on to nothing. Right? Yet in this cloud bank, paragraph 7, it is easy to see a whole world rising, a solid mountain range, a lake, a city. They all rise in your imagination. And from the clouds, the messengers of your perception return to you, assuring you that it is there. Figures stand out and move about. Actions seem real, and forms appear and shift from loveliness to grotesque, and back and forth they go, as long as you would play the game of children's make-believe. Yet, however long you play it, and regardless of how much imagination you bring to it, you do not confuse it with the world below, nor seek to make it real. Right? He says, realize that, we see all these cities and people and everything, and he says that's a children's game. It's like children laying on the ground and watching the clouds go by and imagining images, dragons and, apples and Elvis, images that are in the clouds. You can make all kinds of images, right? And he says it's easy to see a world rising up as long as you want to keep playing that game, right? Yet, however long you play it, and regardless of how much imagination you bring to it, you do not confuse it with the world below, right? You do not confuse it with the rising consciousness, the thought of a heavenly existence, right? And he says, then don't try to make it real, right? Don't try to make this world so real. And we do that by going back to the mind and asking, could you help me? I think I see this, that, and the other thing. Help me to see this, that, and the other thing correctly. Right? So he says, you don't seek to make it real. Paragraph 8. So should it be with the dark clouds of guilt. No more impenetrable and no more substantial. You will not bruise yourself against them in traveling through. Let your guide teach you their unsubstantial nature as he leads you past them. For beneath them is a world of light, whereon they cast no shadows. Their shadows lie upon the world beyond them, still further from the light. Yet from them to the light their shadows cannot fall. Right? He's telling us there's such a major difference between the world we imagine, this delusional world, and the world of light that just lies beneath, right? That lies beneath the thought of guilt. And he says, let the Holy Spirit take you through these clouds that won't hurt you, right? They can't. You just brush against them and they're gone, right? You will not bruise yourself against them in traveling through. Let your guide teach you their unsubstantial nature. And he's talking about all the thoughts we have, all the things we think are real. He says, bring them to the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit will help you walk through this life, right? Without getting bruised, right? He says, the clouds won't hurt you. Now, I'm not saying that we hook up with the Holy Spirit and, negative things don't happen. They do. But we won't perceive them as negative. We'll understand what's going on. Right. And he's talking about this other world that lies just beneath, paragraph 9. This world of light, this circle of brightness is the real world, where guilt meets with forgiveness. And I have a little note here. It says, when I bring back my projections, which we've been saying all along, all right, I realize I'm using the ego thought system, and I just bring it back, as we say, to the mind and say, help me to see this correctly. I want to bring my projections back. All right? This is where guilt meets with forgiveness. It's the real world, the circle of brightness. Here, the world outside is seen anew, without the shadow of guilt upon it. Here are you forgiven, for here you have forgiven everyone. Here is the new perception, where everything is bright and shining with innocence, washed in the waters of forgiveness, and cleansed of every evil thought you laid upon it. Here there is no attack upon the Son of God, and you are welcome. Here is your innocence, waiting to clothe you and protect you, and make you ready for the final step in the journey inward. Here are the dark and heavy garments of guilt laid by, and gently replaced by purity and love. Okay? So he's talking about when I go to the mind, right? I'm just sinking below this crazy world. Right? He says, I'm entering the world of light. Right? I'm entering the world of forgiveness. Right? Where there is no separation. That's the forgiveness. There is no separation. Right? Where guilt meets with forgiveness. Here the world outside is seen anew. Right? So when I visit that space in my mind, I'm able to look out on the world with a different perception. Right? I have encountered forgiveness. There's no need to project guilt. The guilt is gone. It's washed away. Here are you forgiven, for here you have forgiven everyone. Here is the new perception, right? Where everything is bright and shining with innocence, washed in the waters of forgiveness and cleansed of every evil thought you laid upon it. All right? And this is what he was talking about before. Don't be afraid to bring those thoughts. Like, oh, this thought is just too horrible. I'm embarrassed. All right? Jesus is going to kill me. God's going to condemn me to hell. Don't do that. He says, let the Holy Spirit guide you through those clouds, right? And bring you to this place of light, this place where you are forgiven, right? And you have forgiven everyone, and you see the world differently. Here's a new perception, where everything is bright and shining with innocence, washed in the waters of forgiveness, and cleansed of every evil thought you laid upon it. Here there is no attack upon the Son of God, and you are welcome here. You're welcome. Right? There's no attack on the Son of God. The attack on the Son of God is, I separated and I'm guilty. Right? Then we go around attacking all the segments, all the fragments of myself. They're guilty. I'm attacking them. Right? Here there's no attack, and you're welcome here. You're so welcome here. Right? Here is your innocence. Here is your innocence, and it's waiting to clothe you and protect you and make you ready for the final step in the journey inward. Here are the dark and heavy garments of guilt laid by and gently replaced with purity and love. Right? And this is all taking place in your mind. Right? When we stop for a second and say, wait, I don't want to see through the ego's eyes. I don't want that. I don't want to fight anymore. However your reaction is. And we go to the mind. And we ask, help me to see correctly. In that moment, all these things are occurring. You are welcome in that space of light. You are clothed in innocence in that moment. Right? Everything has dropped away. The heavy garments of guilt have dropped away. Right? And they're replaced by purity and love. And that's what we continue to do until we stay in that space. Right? And we continue to practice until we want that space more than anything. And we stay there. All right? And in that way, we're made ready to take the final step inward. All right? He says, paragraph 10, yet forgiveness is not the end. All right? When the perceptions have been changed, so it's not really the end. All right? Forgiveness does make everything lovely. All right? But it doesn't create. All right? Forgiveness does not create, does not extend everything, all love, all security, everything. Doesn't extend, doesn't create. All right? Forgiveness is the source of healing. Okay? So when my perception is changed, when the guilt is gone, the mind is healed, and I see everything through the eyes of healing. Right? So forgiveness is the source of healing, but it is the messenger of love and not the source of love. Here you are led that God himself can take the final step unhindered. For here does nothing interfere with love, letting it be itself, a step beyond this holy place of forgiveness, a step still further inward, but the one you cannot take, transports you to something completely different. Here is the source of light, nothing perceived, forgiven, not transformed, but merely known. Right? So he says the forgiveness brings you to that doorstep. Right? It is not the source of love. Right? It is the source of healing. And when we are healed, we are brought to the final step. Right? And God himself can take that final step of having you realize that you're embraced by God. How can you verbalize it? All right? Because in that moment, nothing interferes with love, and it lets love be itself. A step beyond this holy place of forgiveness. Right? A step still further inward, but one you cannot take. Right? A step transforms you to something completely, transports you, right, to something completely different. Right? So when that healing is complete, we are transported to something completely different. Right? Here is the source of light. Right? Nothing perceived, forgiven, nor transformed, but merely known. I suggest you only dwell on that as long as you can. Nothing is perceived. Right? Nothing has to be forgiven or transformed. Everything is just known. It's the realm of knowledge. That's the heaven. All right? Paragraph 11, he says, this course will lead to knowledge, but knowledge itself is still beyond the scope of our curriculum. So what we're dealing with here is removing the blocks to the awareness of love's presence. And when we get to that point, love takes over by itself. Okay? It says this course will lead to knowledge, where everything is known. But knowledge itself is still beyond the scope of our curriculum. Nor is there any need for us to try to speak of what must forever lie beyond words. We need remember only that whoever attains the real world, beyond which learning cannot go, will go beyond it, but in a different way. Right? Where learning ends, there God begins. For learning ends before him who is complete, where he begins, and where there is no end. It is not for us to dwell on what cannot be attained. There is too much to learn. The readiness for knowledge still must be attained. All right? So that state of innocence, that forgiveness, right, where our perceptions have been corrected, where the mind is healed of the split, it's healed of that belief in separation. He says that's what we have to work on. All right? So, he says there's too much to learn. The readiness for knowledge still must be attained. All right? So we must make ourselves ready to stand before the realm of knowledge. All right? And we do that by having our perceptions changed, practicing on a daily, hourly, minute-to-minute basis. All right? So, paragraph 12, love is not learned. It just is. Its meaning lies within itself. And learning ends when you have recognized all that it is not. That's what he says in the very beginning. We're not teaching love, we're talking about removing the blocks to the awareness of love. Okay? And learning ends when you have recognized all that love is not. Right? That is the interference. That is what needs to be undone. Love is not learned because there never was a time in which you knew it not. Okay? Learning is useless in the presence of your Creator, whose acknowledgement of you and yours of Him so far transcend all learning that everything you learned is meaningless, replaced forever by the knowledge of love and its one meaning. All right? He's saying this once again, very poetically, all right? Just as he said in the beginnings of this text, that this is not a course on love. It's a course on removing the obstacles, the blocks to the awareness of love. And so he says, love is not learned, right? And he says, and learning ends when you recognized all that it is not. Oh, that's not loving. That's not love. Right? That is the interference. That's what needs to be undone. And he says, love is not learned because there never was a time in which you knew it not. Even in our most darkest days, our most darkest hours, all right, we are not aware that we are constantly in the flow of love, and we know what it is. We've just covered over that knowledge. We've covered it over with these seemingly dark clouds of the world and the body. Right? And this is what needs to be undone. Our belief in all kinds of things. All right? So, learning is useless in the presence of your Creator. You don't need to learn anything when you're in the presence of your Creator, whose acknowledgement of you and yours of Him so far transcend all learning that everything you learned is meaningless, replaced forever by the knowledge of love and its one meaning. So everything is just replaced by the knowledge of love, right? And its one meaning. Right? It's oneness. paragraph 13. Your relationship with your brother has been uprooted from the world of shadows, and its unholy purpose has been safely brought through the barriers of guilt, washed with forgiveness, and set shining and firmly rooted in the world of light. From there it calls to you to follow the course it took, lifted high above its darkness, and gently placed before the gates of heaven. The holy instant in which you and your brother were united is but the messenger of love, sent from beyond forgiveness to remind you of all that lies beyond it. Yet it is through forgiveness that it will be remembered. Right? So all love will be remembered through forgiveness. And forgiveness, once again, is I stop my projections. I take them. I don't want to project guilt onto my brother anymore. I'm willing to see correctly. I'm willing for my perception of the other to be changed. Right? And it's through this process of forgiveness that I come closer and closer to remembering love, remembering the presence of love, becoming aware of its all-inclusive nature. I become aware of it through that process of forgiveness. Okay? And when the memory of God, paragraph 14, and when the memory of God has come to you in the holy place of forgiveness, you will remember nothing else. And memory will be as useless as learning, for your only purpose will be creating. Right? So when the memory of God has come to you, right, in that holy place of forgiveness, you will remember nothing else. Right? And memory will be as useless as learning, for your only purpose will be creating. We'll be back to who we really are. Creating, that's our only purpose, which means extending love outward. Yet this you cannot know until every perception has been cleansed and purified, and finally removed forever. All right, so you can't know this. You will not know who you are. You will not remember God until every perception has been cleansed and purified. Right? And finally removed forever. Forgiveness removes only the untrue, lifting the shadows from the world and carrying it safe and sure within its gentleness to the bright world of new and clean perception. This is your purpose now, and it is there that peace awaits you. All right, so our purpose now is forgiveness. Right? And peace is waiting there for us. All right? It's just removing what is untrue. Forgiveness removes only the untrue. You're guilty. Bottom line is, that's not true, because nobody's guilty. All right? Within time, where we think we are, what we created, sure, there's all kinds of offenses. You're guilty. You know, you went through the red light on purpose. You're guilty. You know, so there's things here in this world, but we're talking about the major source of all those things. All right? Bring those thoughts of projected guilt, bring them back to be cleansed, to be purified, and finally removed forever. Right? Because some people in our lives, you know, you probably or thinking of him right now. It takes a long time. Yeah, I forgive. I'm willing to see his innocence. And then 3 hours later, he's doing the same thing, and it's hard to see his innocence again. But that's the practice until the guilt is removed forever. Right? So what is untrue is removed forever. Sometimes you got to keep hammering away at it. But that's the willingness, the great willingness Jesus talks about. He talks about a little willingness and a great willingness. Right? The great willingness is to keep up the process. Right? Lifting the shadows from the world and carrying it, safe and sure within its gentleness, to the bright world of new and clean perception. That's what forgiveness does. And this is your purpose now. And it is there that peace awaits you. When we have stopped projecting guilt, we will be very, very peaceful. Very, very peaceful. And there will be a new world will rise. All right? So those are the two worlds Jesus talks about. All right? The world of the world that was founded on the thought of guilt. Trying to get rid of that guilt in the mind, so I project out of the mind and into this universe where there's so many distractions. So that the idea is to never go back to the mind. To be too busy to even know you have a mind that you can return to. Right? That's the idea of this dream that we're in. Right? And this whole chapter has been talking about the passing of this dream. All right? So it's been very interesting. All right? He calls this dream the substitute reality. Right? And the basis of the dream is always guilt. Right? And he reminds us that there is light. There's always light in the dream. Right? If we just step back for a moment and question what's going on, right? We can allow the light to come in, allow the light to grow. The light is always there. Right? Sometimes it's just a spark. Right? You just need a little willingness. Right? To transform all of this nightmarish stuff into a happier dream. Right? And he reminds us that there's a world beyond the body. Right? And you don't have to do anything. You don't have to sacrifice. You don't have to, fast, to make pilgrimages and go on retreats. All that is cool. Don't let me give you the idea that, don't do that. It's all good. Hey, therapy is good. Don't let me tell you not to do that. Right? But he says, in your mind, all you need to do is be willing. Be willing to be holy, as he says. All right? And we'll get to see the difference between these two worlds. And the more we choose that world based on forgiveness, the more we'll want it, and we'll just enter into this space where we're ready to know everything. All right? And the dream passes. Okay? And so, that's a brief and shaky synopsis of the chapter 18. And I look forward to beginning a new chapter with you in the next session, because the next session is called The Attainment of Peace. Alrighty then. Au revoir, as they say in some parts. Bye now.